Hey everyone, it is Gabe from Babylon Journey, and we are diving into particles today. And this is going to be really fun, really visually friendly topic, as you can see from this scene here. So what are particles? What are particle systems? Well, as I said, the space I'm in has tons of particle systems happening. This rain is a particle system. This kind of yellow dot glitter wall is a particle system. Even this super epic kind of orb thing is a particle system, and this more toned down one here is one too. These are kind of like systems comprised of a lot of small little entities. These could be sprites, these can be textures, usually some kind of like little, bit of color or something like that. And they're really optimized so that, you can do a lot of them. Like you can do very complex particle systems that have a lot of particles in them moving around. Now, these can take a toll on performance. We're going to look at two kinds of particle systems today. A regular particle system, which is really driven by the CPU, but then also GPU particle systems, which leverage the GPU to let you make even more complex systems that are not, they're not going to tank your performance, assuming you've got a decent GPU. Okay, also, we're going to get into the scripting of it, of course, but just so you know, we're also going to look at the very end. Babylon has a really cool no-code, like particle system editor that lets you visually prototype your particle systems before you get into the coding of them. And just in case you want to see like a whole library of existing particle systems, and you can see how they're set up, we actually have one up at library.framevr.io. This is like just a supporting thing that we make alongside our product Frame. This is the product that I started a couple years ago. And you can actually bring in particle systems from this library. You can bring in your own particle systems right here into Frame if you want a place to explore them with other people. I don't mean to plug Frame too much, but I'm just saying this does happen to be a cool way for you to showcase your systems, and then you can invite people in and look at them together and talk about them. Okay, let's actually dive into the code now. I'm going to do these videos just a little bit differently than I have been. This episode a little bit different. We're going to see how it goes. But basically, instead of doing like a starting, I usually do two code sandboxes, right? Like a starting project and then a final project. And I usually just kind of work through the starting project till I end up at the final project. And a lot of the time it's just me click-clacking away and not necessarily me just like explaining key things. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm just going to have one link to the demo that I made here. And the time in the video is just going to be me actually talking you through the demo. And I think it's going to be just as helpful. I think it's actually going to be more helpful. And it's going to keep these videos a little bit shorter. So you're going to be able to get all the key concepts. And you're going to see the final created demo that you can go in and edit and mess with after you fork the code sandbox. And I think it's going to go okay. Let me know in the comments if this is lame or if this is better. All right, with that said, let's go ahead and dive in. Now I want to see my code and I want to see my actual scene that this code creates. So let me close the preview here. I'll make a separate window and we're going to go to the app that we're going to go ahead and build in this demo. So I want to make a fireworks display with all of you. And basically when the user clicks around the scene, I want different like cool effects to happen. And that's what we're going to do. This is the demo. I'm going to show you how I built this. Okay. See, as I'm clicking around, different particle systems are getting triggered. And some of these are really epic. And we're going to look at each one. Okay. Let me go to, I actually want to make sure, oh yeah, this is the one I want. Okay, lovely. Okay, the link to this will be in the YouTube video and I'm going to dive in. Now, the boilerplate really for this project up at the top, I'm importing a lot of things from the Babylon library. And some of the new ones that will be unfamiliar to you from the previous episodes are the particle system class and the GPU particle system class. I'm also importing texture. And I've also imported a couple images from the assets folder of the project. You can use your own images as the kind of sprite on the particles. I've brought in a flare, a star, and a splash. Now the classic stuff that we've seen in every episode since episode 1 we get a reference to the canvas, which we've defined in the index HTML. We've got a canvas element with an ID render canvas. We're going to grab that, pass that into the engine, pass that engine into the scene, and we're going to make a hemispheric light. We're going to make a camera. This is our arc rotate camera, which can rotate around a pivot point. We've used it a lot so far. And then finally going to run the render loop. Engine.run render loop, scene.render. This is what actually gets some pixels showing up on our screen. And then just in case the user resizes the window, we've got this resize observable to resize the engine at the same time. All right, now how did I make it so that when the user actually clicked somewhere, something happened? Like we need kind of something for the user to click on. So what I did here was, and there are a lot of ways to do this, but the way I did this was I made a plane with the create plane helper, like builder function in Babylon. Create plane will just make a plane. I made it really big, and I put it in front of the camera with this little trick. I said plane mesh.position equals, and I have a reference to the camera up here. So I just grab its position like this, camera.position dot add. And then you can use this camera.getForwardRay to kind of get the vector in the forward direction of the camera. GetForwardRay.direction, and I wanted it 10 units in front, so I just scaled it up 10. So that kind of gives me this position 10 units in front of the camera. And then finally, you can do planeMesh.lookAt, which is a method on the mesh class, to have the mesh kind of oriented towards the direction of a vector that you pass into it. I'm going to pass in camera.position. And then finally, I don't even want this plane to be visible, right? Like you can't see the plane in the demo, so we can just turn its visibility off. Fair enough. It's still pickable, but it's not visible. And then finally, I mean, I guess I should have done this up above where I made the camera, and I'll move this line of code right there right now. We have to attach the camera to our canvas, which we have to do in all the projects. Okay. Now let's get into actually making our particle systems, and just so that we can look at one at a time, I'm going to comment some out of this particle systems array so we can look at one at a time. First one is this very basic particle system, and let me refresh so we can just look at this one. Okay, here we go. Now we just see that one particle system. So how did we make this one? This is kind of a nice little splashy. It's kind of reminding me of some fireworks, so nice and little like splash. So the first thing you do is actually make a new instance of the particle system class. I imported this from the Babylon library. So that's fair enough. You give it a name, and the second argument, you pass in the maximum number of particles that are going to be active in this system. You can hover over it to see what these arguments are. The max number of particles alive at the same time, and then you pass in the scene. So there's never going to be more than 2,000 of these particles in this system live at any time. Now, what is this little dot? Like, what actually is an individual particle? Well, for that, you set the particle texture on the particle system. So I grab my particle system reference, and you can dig into it, all the properties on it, .particle texture, and then I passed in a new texture. This is another Babylon class, and you can pass in a reference to an image file or an image URL right here. Okay. So that's what I did to that little flare. That's what that looks like. It's one of those little dots. It's a very simple little PNG image. Looks like a little circle. Okay. Now I set the blue colors on it with these color 1 properties. Now what's color 1, color 2, and color dead? Basically, a particle system, you can define a lot of different colors in the life cycle of the particle. And by life cycle, I mean like the extent. Think of when the particle comes into view and when the particle fades away. That's like the life cycle of the particle, right? Each of these particles, it starts, gets emitted from the emitter, and eventually it's gone. But you can set the color you want it to have at different phases. Color 1, color 2, color 3 lets you make these color steps. And the color of it will kind of like morph into these different colors you set. And color dead is the color it's going to finally morph into before the particle actually fades away, like drops away out of the system. So I've set different kind of like blue versions, and then the final one you can see is a very faint blue. This is how it sort of has this like fade out effect. Okay, this is pretty cool. Now, min size and max size, this is for setting the actual size of an individual particle. And Babylon gives you these really elegant ways to like randomize it. So rather than having to do like a complex randomization function, you can just set min and max, and it'll pick something between these values for each individual particle. Same with lifetime. This is the duration that the particle is alive. I've set it to, some of them will only be alive for a little bit, and some of them will be alive for, a lot longer. That's why some fade out real fast while others persist a lot longer. Okay, now the emit rate, as you can see, is the maximum number of particles to emit per frame. So if you really jack up the emit rate, like let's jack this up right now to 40,000, show you the difference. It's going to be like way more particles. Okay, it's like a lot more, right? But we just want that much is fine. Now, how do we get them to come out in this nice sphere and emit outwards? This is a really cool little trick. So Babylon lets you get really customize the emitter for the system. The emitter is like where the particles come from. And I wanted them to come not just from a particular point, like headed out in one direction. I wanted them to come outwards, like kind of out of a sphere. And so that's why I did create sphere emitter. You can just do particle system.create sphere emitter. Now we'll see later on, you can also do create cone. You can do create box emitter, and it'll come out of more of a boxy shape. You can also do create mesh emitter, and you can link a separate custom like 3D model you've put into your scene to have it come out of custom geometry. And then I didn't want them all to come out at the same like power, like kind of like the oomph that they have when they first get emitted. So I'd put a little bit of variety on the emit power. Okay, those are really the kind of like important ones, and that's how I got this nice splashy effect where they're coming out of this sphere with a nice blue kind of fade out sort of effect. Using color 1, color 2, color dead, and create sphere emitter. All right, lovely. Let's look at the fountain. Okay, now the fountain is really interesting, and I'm going to now comment out particle system and comment in the fountain. First, let's take a look at it. Okay, here's the fountain. Now, what's interesting about the fountain, the key concept I want to convey to you is that you can apply gravity to your particles. In a lot of fireworks, you see something kind of like spark up, and then what's really cool is you can see them fall, right? Because like they're falling to earth. And I wanted that effect with this little fountain. It's kind of goofy in other respects, but it's at least a way to convey this gravity concept. So let's look at my fountain code. And just as before, new particle system, just making a new instance of the particle system class. Same texture as the particle texture, flare. Slightly different values for the min size and the max size and blah, blah, blah. And you don't need to see me go through all these, which is good. Now the emitter, I kind of wanted it to come out in this like sort of cone shape. And so that's why I'm using a create cone emitter. And you can set the radius of the cone and then the angle of the cone. This math.pi, like pi divided by 3. It's a decent angle. It's like not too narrow, not too wide. I liked it. Got the emit rate, I got min, max, emit power, but then importantly, gravity, which is represented with a vector 3. Think about gravity, it's a downward force, kind of on the y-axis, right? It's like downward. The way you represent that with the vector is new vector 3, 0, negative 9.81, and 0. And that'll give you like a gravity effect. Got color 1, color 2, color dead. But I think the way I did this blend mode is kind of wrong. Let me actually save this. But the short of it is gravity works with particle systems, and that is why these particles fall down. So they emit upwards, gravity brings them back down. Pretty cool. Okay, now for the third system, Starfield, I wanted to do something a little bit different. Instead of particles that kind of like floated around a lot, like emitted in a certain direction and moved around, I wanted particles that just came into view and then left view, kind of like twinkled into view, and not necessarily moving around in fun, fancy ways, but just like coming into view. So let's see what my Starfield looks like, and then I can explain it. There it is. See, so a lot of things coming into view, but it's not like they're moving around. But I thought this was kind of a cool effect and something worth showing you how to achieve. So notice that this has a different image for the particle. It's not the flare. It's actually like a little star. Okay, that's because I've passed in a different image into the texture class that I'm passing in to be the particle texture. Okay. Now for this one, I wanted them to appear like all around the visual field. And to do this, I made a sphere emitter, but with a really big radius. So these will pop into view somewhere inside of a really large sphere, which is why they're going to show up here, right? This sphere is like bigger than where my camera is looking at right now, so it's going to just show up everywhere. Now, min size, min lifetime, max lifetime, we talked about all these, emit rate, but then importantly, to get them static like this so they didn't move around, I just changed the min emit power and max emit power to 0. Boom. And that's how you achieve that. Just twinkle in, twinkle out. All right, lovely. Now, this next one is really fun, rotating particles. So let's bring this one into view so that we can look at it. And then I will explain it. Refresh. How cool is that? It's a little goofy, but it's kind of cool. So what you can see is that we can actually get these particles to rotate. And this is a lot of fun. You'll probably do cooler things with this than I did, but it's okay. I hope you do. So how did I do this? Well, I have a new texture. You got this like funky splash. I call the image is called splash in the import, so I pass that in. It's a sphere emitter, but with a much smaller radius. So it's it's kind of like emitting from this little area and going outwards because it's got an emit rate and min size, max size. It's not static like the last one with the 0 power. But the key thing is to see, you can set the initial rotation of the particle. And I've done a min max with this, 0 up to pi. But then the key one is this min angular speed and max angular speed. This is the speed that it like rotates. And if you've set these values, then these will be spinning. Now, if we were using that first flare image that was just like the little circle in the first example, you wouldn't even notice that because you can't notice when a circle is rotating. But with this texture, you can, because you can see them spin. And the reason why some of them are spinning faster than others is because of this min max. Amazing. Okay, we're just like ripping through this stuff. My sense of doing this video so far is that this is actually going to be better than watching me actually just type out all these values. In fact, I tried doing this before where I was like typing it out live, and like half the video was just me typing in these like different variables for the colors and stuff. It was goofy. Okay, now last but certainly not least, we've got a really epic GPU particle system. Now, you want to use, generally, I would just try to use GPU systems where you can. You'll see in the Babylon documentation around their particle systems that there are a couple features in particle systems that you can't use if you have it as a GPU particle system, but they're kind of like edgy features. And more often than not, I think you'll be able to just use a GPU system, a GPU particle system. But you definitely want to try to use it if you're going to be working with a system with like tons and tons and tons of particles, right? Because if it can leverage your GPU to do this, then it's a fairly efficient way of doing this. If you were to do this with a regular particle system with the CPU, you can run into trouble with your FPS. Now, you do need to be on a WebGL2 enabled browser, but really every browser, even Safari, shocker, I know, even Safari has supported WebGL2 for a little while, and hopefully they'll all support WebGPU as well, but that's a different story. So I've gone ahead and made a new particle system, but instead of doing new particle system, it's new GPU particle system. The syntax is a little bit different. It takes an options object where you pass in that capacity, like the max number of particles that'll be alive. Look how juicy this is, 150,000. Let's go. And then GPU system active particle count, 150,000. I've made a box emitter because I want it to kind of emit not just from a single point, kind of in this like sort of boxy way, which you'll notice, which is really cool. I've given it that flare texture from the very first one. And I've set these things that we are used to seeing. And I've given it a few different colors in its life cycle, which you're going to see. Now, the blend mode is really important. The blend mode is kind of like how the color of these particles will sort of interact with each other. So when you have a lot of particles that are visually on top of each other, how do we want the color to behave? Do we want them to add to each other so that they get really bright? Or sorry, like multiply. Like you can choose different blend modes, multiply and add, and so forth. And different ones, you'll see the colors of the particles interacting with each other differently when they are blending or on top of each other. And for this one, I really liked multiply add. And then I also gave it some gravity. So let's see what this epic GPU particle system looks like, okay? Amazing. Look how many particles this is. It's just so good. Boom. And the box emitter is glorious. The way the colors work through the life cycle is glorious. The reason why it gets so bright is because of that blend mode, where when a lot of them are overlapping, the colors are kind of like multiplying. Just really sweet. And then gravity like brings them down. It's just astonishing. I love it. Let's just see for kicks. I mean, could I juice this up even more? Like instead of 15, like 40, and then 15, like 40. Save. Let's see. There might be so many here that we can like barely even tell the difference. It's just the difference between a lot and a lot more. Yeah, I mean, it just still looks like a ton. Awesome. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Love it. Can't wait to see what you do with these. Now, finally, how did I make it so that it has this like click effect, so that when you click, different fireworks show up, and not just different fireworks, but different randomly chosen fireworks of all the different firework systems that I've made here in this demo. And I'm going to show you. We got to bring our commas back. What I've done was I've made an array of the particle systems, right? Each one I defined with a reference, right? Like as a constant. So that's where I'm storing their references, but then I just make an array where I pass in all of them. Okay, and this will become important in a bit. And finally, to detect the click, like on the scene has an observable on pointer down. You can just pass in a function that'll fire on pointer down. Nice. Then on pointer down, what I've done was scene.pick, and you can pass in the pointer X and the pointer Y. This is like kind of where in 2D space the pointer is, like XY coordinates on the 2D plane that is like the screen. And then finally, you can pass in this like little predicate, which just will only return true for the hit if the mesh that is hit matches your predicate function here. And this I want to say, if the mesh is the plane mesh that I created at the very beginning, remember I made this plane at the very beginning that was invisible, basically say, okay, return a hit if the mesh that's chosen is this plane. Then I'll have a good pick result. And then if pick result.hit, which it will be as long as you're clicking that plane that you made, then I do a random index function, a little bit of math to just get a random value between 0 and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Math.floor, math.random. This kind of rounds it down. Then I'm doing math.random times particle systems dot length. So I'm getting some random index that represents any number between 1 and 5. And then I just grab one of those systems randomly. Selected particle system equals particle systems, and I pass in my random index. It just gives me one of my particle systems chosen at random. And then what I do to make the particle system actually start at the place of my click, I change the emitter position to my pick result dot picked point. This is like the pick result gives you this really big object, and to actually get the particular position vector of where it is, you got to dig into the picked point. And then once I've got that, I've kind of moved the particle system to that spot, I start it with the start method on the particle system class. And then afterwards, I just have it time out. After a second, then I stop the system. That's why those systems stop and start as they do, based on those clicks. So now I've brought all of these back. And if I refresh my page, we'll go back to like different systems appearing on different clicks. There is our fireworks show with particle systems. Before, my video for this was an hour long, and it wasn't any better. Look at that. Let's go. And I think this way of doing these videos was just as effective. I hope it was for you. Fork this code sandbox, mess with it, have fun with your systems. And then notice if you go to library.framevr.io, we've got a whole library of particle systems that you can look at. Not only can you look at them, you can remix them. I'm going to click this remix button, and this opens up a no-code editor that Babylon has made that lets you actually tweak tons of these properties that we talked about here: blend mode, emitter, minimum scale, like all different colors, all this stuff you can actually modify here to give you like a no-code way of trying out these different properties. Amazing. And then let's say you modify this and you make something really cool. Like let's say, oh, I'm going to change the blend mode to 1:1. And this is atrociously ugly, but let's say you really like that. Check out this cool thing you can do. You can click Save to Snippet Server, and that will change this little snippet ID. And then inside of Frame, which I know is my little metaverse product, but this is just such a cool thing you can do, and this is all free, by the way. Just click Add on your frame, and you can click Effects. Bring in whatever particle system you want, like this simple fire. Turn on edit mode. You can paste in your own particle system ID and click set, and then you will see your particle system here in Frame, and you can invite other people in and check them out and talk about them and make a cool little gallery, whatever you want to do. Just throwing it out there as something cool you can do with those particle systems. Okay, so there you have it. We've gone over how I created this really cool demo, little fireworks show with different kinds of particle systems. We've learned about all sorts of different properties you can get into. Not a comprehensive look. There's tons more, but this gives you at least a starting point of some of the things you can do with the very cool Babylon particle system. Hope you enjoyed this video. I'll see you for the next one.